What is going on, Colts Nation? It's Elijah from Sports Talk Indy, and normally we cover videos every single day, but honestly, it has been a crazy couple weeks. As I mentioned in one of our last videos, we've just recently welcomed a new baby, and honestly, it's been really, really hard to want to cover the Colts right now. This has been a bleak and dark time, as bleak and as dark as we've seen the Indianapolis Colts, and yet here we are sitting at 4-5. But the last thing I wanted to do was make a video and just be in this echo chamber, be in the same sort of thing that everyone else is saying, whether you're pro the benching of Anthony Richardson, whether you're against the benching of Anthony Richardson. I didn't want to be just another voice in that and to just offer nothing of value but just speculation or criticism of the decision or not the decision, whatever that may be, of even the pick of Anthony Richardson. I didn't want to do that because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to just fall into the hole. And if you've been on Colts Twitter over the past couple of weeks, you know that it's been a hectic place. There have been people who are saying, I told you so. There are people who are doing this. There's the talking heads. But there's a little bit of perspective that I want to offer and the reason for making this video. Because again, if you watched last night's game against the Vikings, there's not a lot that you can take away from that and say the future is bright in Indy. The defense looked really good, honestly, especially for being on the field a majority of the game. But the offense looked terrible. It did not. Nothing was able to get going. Jonathan Taylor didn't look good. Ryan Kelly, the center, didn't look good, which was kind of surprising, especially as he's supposed to be one of the premier centers in the league. This is a contract year for him, so you really don't like to see that. But what did we learn? What are we seeing? And there's a little bit of there's a nugget that actually an unexpected source or an unexpected voice shared that I think is very helpful for the situation with Anthony Richardson. So we're going to cover that. We're going to cover that nugget and a little bit more and just a background of the situation. The unexpected nugget of possibly a mind-blowing thought was from Chris Collinsworth, of all people. I mean, this is a guy who doesn't normally offer in some insightful wisdom per se. A lot of it is glazing. A lot of it is him really talking up specific players in the NFL, and it kind of gets old, honestly. But he said something last night that really immediately, as soon as he said it, really perked my attention, really turned my ears to this. And it was this. He said, I think that the benching of Anthony Richardson has more to do with them protecting him than anything else. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because here's what I think is happening. Because I don't think he's wrong. I actually think that he's more right than maybe we lead on. The benching of Anthony Richardson is, from what we've understood, is a Shane Steichen decision. He made the decision. He said, this is me and me alone benching Anthony Richardson. Now, this is after the play. This is after Anthony Richardson tapped out of the game, had a 33% completion percentage, all that. And there's tons of reasons to be optimistic about the last game Anthony Richardson played and tons of reasons to be negative because there were some mind-bogglingly good throws and some mind-bogglingly bad throws. But that's not what I want to talk about. Because when you looked at that, there's a very clear, regardless of where you stand on that specific game or the situation of Anthony Richardson tapping out, I think we can all agree that there's been some regression in Anthony Richardson. Every game does not seem to be getting better. In fact, it does by at least an outside perspective, does appear to be looking like he's getting worse. And there's an interesting thought here of why do the drops follow Anthony Richardson? Because if you look at the college highlights, there were some throws that Anthony Richardson was making that were great throws, and yet there were guys dropping these passes. So the question then remains is why is he dealing with drops in the NFL and drops in college? Is he throwing too much? Is he trying to throw a fastball when he really needs to be throwing a little bit more touch into the ball? All of that, right? That's one of the schools of thought. But regardless of that, there is still some clear regression from where we left off last season. Now, he took almost a whole season off of football, so that's kind of to be expected. But again, that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the coach's decision to bench Anthony Richardson and why I think it might not be the worst decision in the world. Now, don't get me wrong, Joe Flacco's not the future of this franchise, and Joe Flacco is not going to lead the Colts to a Super Bowl. If you think the Colts are going to win a Super Bowl, you might as well stop watching now because I'm not going to back that narrative. It's not going to happen this year. I think the Colts have a really up-and-coming roster. I think they have a lot of budding talent. You even look at the offensive line and Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonzalez and Dalton Tucker. I think those are 3 offensive linemen who could be very good for a long time for this Indianapolis Colts team, as some guys like Ryan Kelly are starting to age out of the position and out of the roster for Indy. You look at this, you look at the defensive back room with Samuel Womack and Jalen Jones and even Juju Brents as he comes back. You look at the safety rooms, which was one of the most highly speculated rooms in football, is now one of the premier safety rooms in all of football, with Julian Blackmon and Nick Cross both having absolutely unbelievably good seasons, unbelievably compared to where we thought they were going to be. We thought this was going to be the weakness. There's an abutting in this. But if you think they're going to win the Super Bowl this year, you're wrong. But what I think is happening is actually another thing came from Mike Greenberg earlier in the season. Early in the season, he was saying it's way too early to be throwing Anthony Richardson out there. It's way too early to be throwing Anthony Richardson out there. I think that what is happening is that they're seeing that Anthony Richardson is not progressing on the field and getting these specific kinds of reps. And so the decision was made that instead of him trying to get these reps on the field, it was a mental game. Because Anthony Richardson has no shortage of arm talent and ability. But I think the issue that was facing this season, and you watch any single game, the form is there. His throws were not bad, but what they were was late. A lot of these throws were unnecessarily contested because a lot of the hitch routes, he wouldn't hit them on the hitch routes. He would hit them after they had stopped and the DB was able to get close. So even though they were counted as drops on the wide receiver and counted as incompletions, and everything looked fine, there's a little bit of a little bit that you see from guys who've been playing the position and in the system for a long time. And that is these guys are able to really bring it in and really be able to predict where the wide receiver is going. Now, Anthony Richardson did not have that. He's worried way too much about other things and not knowing the plays as well as you would hope him to know. And that's not anything surprising. He's a 22-year-old quarterback who's only started 20 games total, only 10 in the NFL. He's missed several games, almost an entire season of his young career due to injury. And you look at all of that and the fact that he's not able to make reads, and what I think Shane Steichen was able to see, because I still think Shane Steichen is a good football coach. What I think he was seeing was that Anthony Richardson was losing confidence, not only in himself, but in his wide receivers. And so the decision was made to pull the plug on Anthony Richardson for the season. Now, I don't think the Colts are going to seek another quarterback in free agency. I think they're going to seek a potential backup because, like it or not, Anthony Richardson is still injury prone. But what I think Shane Steichen was seeing, and again, somehow Chris Collinsworth opened my eyes to this reality, is that they were seeing that he was losing confidence in himself and in his wide receivers, and decided that for the betterment of everyone else, until the system can be learned even better than it already is, it was better for the future of Anthony Richardson and for this Colts franchise to pull Anthony Richardson until he is able to learn the system more. I think they're protecting him. I think they're really trying to grow this confidence as much as you can while also simultaneously benching him. I think this decision should have been made from the beginning. I don't think Anthony Richardson should have started week 1 last season. I don't think Anthony Richardson should have started week 1 this season. I think that he takes time. Guys like Jordan Love and Alex Smith and even Patrick Mahomes waited a year, and even Lamar Jackson waited almost a full season. They're the best in the business, often have had to wait. Aaron Rodgers had to wait 3 years. Very rarely do quarterbacks come in and do so remarkably well. Joe Burrow had a terrible, it wasn't a great first season at all. It wasn't until he got help, really, that he started to really look like a good quarterback. So very rarely do we have this standard of quarterbacks just coming in and being absolute playmakers like they are. And it happens. C.J. Stroud is a prime example of that. But Tua had a bad first year. Jalen Hurts didn't have a great first year. Justin Herbert didn't have a great, so many of these guys did not have good first years, and they had more starts than Anthony Richardson has. I think what they're trying to do is build Anthony Richardson's mental game up so that way his physical game can remain healthy and active, because they don't want to lose him for another season. But I think that it's going to be a betterment if Anthony Richardson can take this season as I think that the Colts predict him to take it. It's going to be way better for the long-term future of this Colts franchise.